Welcome to the Intel Hub News Brief, uncovering the cold hard truth that the corporate media just can't handle. A service of the IntelHub.com. Now, here's Joe Joseph from Freedom Link Radio and Popeye from Federal Jack.
Welcome aboard, everybody, to the next edition of the Intel Hub News Brief on this Martin Luther King Day. And it's very important to understand the contributions that Dr. King actually gave to us. When you embrace your humanity, race goes by the wayside. You can't use race as something to divide us. We can't use it. It can't be a weapon. We have to take the weapon away from the powers that be. So tonight, my man Popeye here has some good information that we want to put out about Dr. King. And, we'll discuss it a little bit and hopefully shed some light on some things that you may not have known. Go ahead, Popeye.
Well, Joe, racism is just used to keep us divided because it's easier to control all of this if we're all arguing amongst each other than it is if we all understand that we're all the ones getting screwed collectively. Okay?
Right. Embrace your humanity, and you'll come to find out that everybody's human.
First of all, we're all human. I mean, I think the idea of racism...
They're not. If you ask me, they're not.
Well, no, the elitists aren't.
These elitists aren't.
No, they're not human because I think that they're... I don't know what the hell they are, but evil is probably a good word to start with. But they want
demons.
People...
They're demons. Yeah.
Well, they have these racist beliefs. They want people to believe what they believe. They believe this stuff. That's where this stuff comes from. It permeates from them. When people say, well, they believe it. They do believe it. But why do you have to buy into it? You
don't have to buy into it. The same thing can be said about the Jew thing. How everybody's like Jew, anti-Jew, this, that, and everything else.
Oh,
okay?
yeah, everybody blames
something.
It's the label, the Jews.
It is, but it's a small cabal of people at the top that actually do it. It's what I call ring knockers. That's what they are. They're people who have been successful and or know people that have gotten to the top, and they all look out and take care of each other and screw the rest of humanity. Whatever, we don't need you. And that's what happens. It has nothing to do with the fact that you're a Jew or you're black or you're white or you're brown. It doesn't matter what you are. Fact is, it's a members only club. And unfortunately, for 99.9% of society, we're not in that club. So we have to say, look, 99.9%, we need to be in our own club. And that's the human club. And look out for one another and love one another, because the only way that this is going to stop is if we embrace love and kick hate to the curb. And I know it sounds kind of utopian in a way, but really that's the only solution.
No, it is.
If you embrace, it is. That's the only way. That's why.
It's not that fake new agey crap, but it's just on basic level. We have to start to take care of one another. You want things to get better. We have to start to be better within ourselves and to everybody else around us. The country is like a human body, and we are like the living cells inside the body. And if cells are all fighting amongst each other and attacking each other, the body is going to be sick. But if the cells are all working in unison, the body, the country, will be better. So first, let's understand that racism as a base is used to divide us and keep us divided. Okay.
Absolutely.
At a very, very base level,
Absolutely.
It's used to keep us from learning other cultures. It's used to keep us in fear. Martin Luther King fought for the rights of black people to be able to, look what Rosa Parks went through. To me, I think Rosa Parks was a hero. I think the woman she had gumption. She just had enough. She said, no, I'm not taking it.
Civil disobedience.
Yeah, I think she's a hero. Okay.
Me too.
I really think she's a hero. And he stepped up to the plate, and he didn't want other people to continue to go through that. He wanted everybody to have rights. And as thousands upon thousands of other people did. He was just a voice of reason. He kept people calm. He kept things organized. He kept people organized. He knew how to get people to civilly disobey And even in the
Yes.
face of utter violence, like when those cops would come in and fire hose all the people and beat them with batons and everything else, even in the face of all that violence, Dr. King, was able to, his message and his idea was spread so far and so deep that those people, most of them didn't fight back. They took the beatings, and they just got up and kept trying to walk away. I mean, that's incredible.
It is. I often describe Dr. King. Dr. King is like the Ron Paul of the Liberty Movement, only he was, of the civil rights movement. But they both have that same power, that same demeanor about them that just gives hope and gives just absolute motivation. Anybody that buys into it, you can't help but be motivated. And what he did, and what we should see a lot of, you see a lot of wannabes out there and people who profit off it, like your Jesse Jacksons, your Al Sharptons, people like that. They're not really genuine, and they're certainly not in it for the right reasons. But you got guys like Dr. King and people like Ron Paul that are trying to make a change because it's needed, because it's in the best interest of the country, and it's not about money. It's not about making a name for themselves. It's about doing the right thing. It's about having the honor, the commitment, and the courage to do what's right. And that's what guys like Dr. King do. You have to have that type of personality and that demeanor, and people are few and far between like that.
Well, it's interesting that you use Ron Paul as a way of comparison, because he was killed by the very same people that Dr. Paul is against. This New
Absolutely.
World Order, this group of whatever you want to call them, evil morons that want to have this world government. And people could say,
right.
Popeye, what are you talking about? King was killed because he was getting people civil rights and stuff. No. King was killed long after that. See, Dr. King took up a new fight. It was the fight of poverty. Because he realized that it wasn't just people that were impoverished here in the country, but all over the world. And King started to raise his voice. And then King did the unthinkable, at least in their eyes back then. He already walked around, and it can, you have to remember, these people, these elitists, they're racists. They're the ones that project that attitude and that belief and push it on to everybody else, okay? And they were already angry at King for fighting for black people's civil rights and everything else. Then what does King go ahead and do? Because he's already proven himself to be dangerous, because he can organize people, again, to be civilly disobedient, but not violent. And even when they're violently attacked, to not become violent.
Right.
That, my friends, is a talent, okay? That is a talent. To be able to get people to curb their own ego and say, don't give in to them. Don't do what they want. Okay, and they knew he was a force to be reckoned with. When I say they, I mean the establishment. Okay, we'll just call them the establishment for the rest of this podcast. And they knew that King was a danger to them, because he could organize people like that. And he was a galvanizing force. He was very charismatic. And then King did the unthinkable, Joe. He spoke out against Vietnam, and that was a no-no. Because when President Kennedy tried to stop Vietnam and a few other things, he had his head taken off in Dallas. And
rumor had it too that Bobby Kennedy was actually thinking about having him as his vice presidential running mate. It's more than rumor.
I've seen enough evidence to the fact, because I heard that once or twice, and then I decided to actually see if it were true, and not just speculation. And there's a lot of evidence to prove that Bobby was going to ask Martin Luther King to run. You can go look it up, ladies and gentlemen. There's tons of evidence to prove this, and that they would have been, because he was going to end up getting the Democratic nod. And if he had asked Martin Luther King Jr. to be his running mate, that would have been it. The establishment would have been... Can you imagine that ticket? RFK, MLK?
It even rhymed. It even goes together, dude.
Dude, they would have destroyed the establishment. The two of and not that the Kennedys were, some knighthood type group, that the family wasn't all perfect, but John realized something, and Bobby was kind of a putz when he was younger. But after his brother got killed, after John had a change of heart and realized what was going on, and he got killed, Bobby had an epiphany, and he started to realize things, and that's when he started heading kind of in the same direction of his brother, and they couldn't have that, so they killed him before he even got into the office of the presidency. But Bobby was going to run with MLK, so that would have been a power duo right there. They would have just destroyed everything. The establishment wouldn't have known what to do. And I think the country would have been in a better place at that point because at both at their points in their lives, maybe both of them had made mistakes in the past when they were younger, but they were both so enlightened at that period in their life. I really think that the country would have benefited. And these elitist establishment, tycoons, whatever you want to call them, they knew this, and that's why they took both of them out. Now,
I agree.
How do I have the evidence to say that Martin Luther King Jr. was killed by a conspiracy? Didn't they find James Earl Ray? Didn't they say James Earl Ray did it, Popeye? No, they didn't. The government did. But a real trial, a civil trial, was held. Okay, years and years later. I believe it was back in 1999. In fact, let me double check my notes here. Yes, it was 1999. Okay, and I'm going to read you a little blurb here. I'll bet you this will blow your mind. This is from an article I have up on federaljack.com, and it's reposted on FederalJack from the original source, which was Washington's blog. Dr. Martin Luther King's family and his personal friend and attorney, William F. Pepper, won a civil trial that found U.S. government agencies guilty in the wrongful death of Martin Luther King. The 1999 trial, King family versus Jowers and other unknown co-conspirators, is the only trial ever conducted on the assassination of Dr. King. The King family's attempts for a criminal trial were denied, as suspect James Ray's recant of what he claimed was a false confession was denied. So he recanted his statement, and the court didn't want to hear it. They said, we don't care, which is completely against his rights, but that they don't care. Mr. Ray said that his government-appointed attorney told him to sign a confession in order to receive a trial. When Mr. Ray discovered that his signature meant no trial, his and the King family's subsequent requests were denied. The U.S. government also denied the King family's request for independent investigation of the assassination. Therefore, and importantly, the U.S. government has never presented any evidence subject to challenge that substantiates their claim that Mr. Ray assassinated Dr. King. U.S. corporate media did not cover the trial, the interview with the King family, and the textbooks omit this information. Journalist and author James Douglas goes into it, and he gets into it deep. And I have a book by Douglas on JFK. So all of this is tied together. You can see how Douglas is not only a researcher on the JFK assassination, but obviously he's researched King. But if you really want to get the information about the trial and the King family, you can go to the King family has their own website about it, and actually William Pepper wrote a couple books on it. If you go to thekingcenter.org, that's thekingcenter.org /civil case King family versus Jowers. So just go to thekingcenter.org and that's their website, and you can find the information there. But it's titled Civil Case King Family versus Jowers. And it's got all the notes and everything. They put this together so that, the truth about what happened would never be lost. So they have their own website, and go check out William F. Pepper, spelled just like the spice. He has, I believe it's 2 books now out on the subject of the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. there is ample evidence to prove that the CIA, the FBI, and Army intelligence were involved in a plot to kill him. There isn't enough time in this podcast to go into all the details, but there is enough time to play a clip that CNN tried to cover on this. This is years ago. But they play it off like it's a conspiracy theory and it's fake. And at the very end is when they admit that the King family doesn't believe that James Earl Ray killed Martin Luther King Jr. I'm going to play this clip. But remember, you're hearing it from CNN. So go do the research yourself. And remember what the King family says. That none of them, including his wife, his children, believe that James Earl Ray killed Martin Luther King Jr. Now, here's this supposed truth piece by CNN.
To be the most dangerous Negro leader in the country.
They called him in one of the FBI memos released later, the most dangerous Negro.
I think that's probably a compliment.
Andrew.
And this was a thing Soledad O'Brien did. I have to cut it off for a second. This was a video that Soledad O'Brien had done exposing a couple years ago one of the King inner circle. It has come out that he was an FBI informant the whole time. So it's a clip of this, and then the video maker put some evidence to prove that it's not a quote-unquote conspiracy theory. But I wanted to inform you because the audio will go from one clip to another, and you won't be able to visually see it. So here you go.
Young, one of King's closest advisors, says the inner circle was very much aware that the government was spying on them.
I mean, we saw the FBI. They were not very subtle. I mean, they all dressed alike with little skinny ties and crew cuts for the most part.
In October of 1963, Robert Kennedy signed off on wiretaps. Atlanta agents broke into Dr. King's home and office to install them. Did you know the FBI was tapping your phones?
Oh, yeah.
You assumed it or you knew it?
No, we knew it.
Nothing was sacred. Young remembers how fellow minister Ralph Abernathy discovered an FBI bug while speaking at an Alabama church.
And he said, look here, and he took the little microphone out and he put it up on top of the pulpit, and he said, little doohickey, I want you to tell President Johnson, and I want you to tell J. Edgar Hoover, I want you to tell George Wallace, I want you to tell everybody that no matter what they think, we are going to be free. And the whole church just cheered.
But there were no cheers when FBI surveillance caught Dr. King in an embarrassing moment. It was 1964 at the Willard Hotel in Washington, D.C.
A bunch of guys.
And of course, here comes the hit part of the little clip from CNN. But they throw at the very end that they it wasn't Dr. King, or they thought it was Dr. King, but they don't really have any evidence to prove that it was him in the hotel.
Guys were in the room clowning, and they were having a very good time. And then it quieted down, and someone was left in the room and was recorded in the act of sexual intercourse. And they assumed it was Dr. King.
So the FBI took it one more nasty step. When Dr. King won the Nobel Prize, the FBI mailed an anonymous package to Dr. King's office. On it, highlights from the sex tapes with an ominous note.
You are a colossal fraud and an evil, vicious one at that. The American public will know you for what you are, an evil, abnormal beast. King, you are done.
That's the FBI sending King that letter. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, the Federal Bureau of Intimidation.
The implication was that this was supposed to provoke him to suicide.
Yet King was unmoved by the FBI's truly dirty tricks.
He saw this as part of his life, just the way he would have to live for the rest of his life.
This is a special report from WALB News 10.
Last month, people all over the United States celebrated the birth of a civil rights leader.
In a little more than a month, we'll mark a sad anniversary, the 40th anniversary of Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination. Some people still have questions about his death. Many people have conspiracy theories. And one South Georgia civil rights leader says he knows for a fact who's behind it all. WALB News 10's Lynn Keys explores these MLK conspiracy theories in tonight's special report.
I have a dream.
It was a dream, deferred by a gunshot in Memphis. The date, April 4th, 1968.
That day, I was in Clay County.
Reverend Charles Sherrod felt the shot all the way here in South Georgia.
That was just distressful.
Sherrod knew Martin Luther King Jr. as more than a civil rights leader.
I got to know him as a person.
And he says he knows to this very day there's more to his murder.
I wondered how many people were involved.
On that day in April at the Lorraine Motel, several people pointed to where the deadly gunshot came from. Reverend Jesse Jackson was one of them.
We were saying to the police, you guys are coming this way. The bullet came from that way. I mean, don't come.
By the way, my personal belief is Jesse Jackson knew more than he's letting on. That's from all the research I've done into it. You have to go do the research, look up the assassination of MLK on YouTube. I've uploaded it a few times. It's a really good documentary. It shows you all everything that was going on with the FBI and other stuff.
Yeah, go there.
The investigation led to the arrest of this man, who the nation came to know as James Earl Ray.
I don't think he acted alone.
Just like Sherrod, authorities at first thought the same thing. They looked for more and investigated the assassination as a possible conspiracy. But all evidence pointed to Ray, the rifle, the getaway car. Still, Ray launched his...
Wait a minute, so you mean to tell me that, just like all these other things, Gabrielle Gifford's getting shot and all this other stuff, there was a John Doe number 2, a second gunman on the grassy knoll? You mean there was somebody else? And all of a sudden, it's just one guy. Convenient.
His own conspiracy theory shortly after he confessed.
Well, first, I didn't kill Dr. King.
Ray maintained until his death that he took the blame, but a man by the name of Raoul actually killed King. This is from an audio tape made a few months before Ray died in 1998 with what he says were instructions from Raoul.
He told me he liked me to go to a movie somewhere because he wanted to talk to these people, privately.
Adding to this theory was a claim by a retired FBI employee in the late 90s. Donald Wilson claimed he found pieces of paper in Ray's car that had the name Raoul written on them. For the next 30 years, he says that evidence was stored in his refrigerator. The FBI called that story a lie.
There is no proof that Ray was with anybody else in Memphis.
Another conspiracy theory came to light a few years before, in 1993. The King case was reopened after Memphis bar owner Lloyd Jowers came forward. Jowers ran Jim's Grill across from the Lorraine Motel and claimed another Memphis businessman, Frank Liberto, paid him $100,000 to contract a killer.
What did Frank Liberto ask you to do?
He asked me to handle some money transaction, hire someone to assassinate Dr. Martin Luther King.
Jowers said that someone was not James Earl Ray. He named a Memphis police officer as the killer and said that he himself threw the murder rifle in the Mississippi River. A 7-month investigation found no evidence of this conspiracy. So who did it?
The government.
Reverend Sherrod says King was getting more radical with his approach to civil rights, and people wanted him quieted.
So what happens when we come to Memphis? There's a breakdown. There's an intentional breakdown. Hoover.
Shelby County criminal prosecutor John Campbell and a team of investigators spent 4 years re-examining evidence from the King murder, but came up with nothing solid. Conspiracy theories continue.
You do have an underpinning, a kernel of truth, that these things spring from. We know that J. Edgar Hoover was doing all kinds of illegal things to Dr. King. We know that. We also know that Bobby Kennedy approved it, as the Attorney General was approving illegal wiretaps. It's not a hard stretch for some people to say, well, if they were doing that, then certainly they were capable of killing him.
Ironically, the same force that Sherrod feels is behind King's murder is the same force he thinks will shed light on the case.
Either the government or somebody who's been in the government or somebody who's in the government.
He says there will be repercussions for that truth, though.
Do you think you'll see what you call the truth come out in your lifetime?
I believe so.
Until that day, Sherrod will continue to rely on the good memories of a man who could preach to a crowd of thousands in the day to play a game of pool with an Albany friend in the evening.
He could talk with kings and he could talk with people like me.
But people like him still have questions about how a king's dream ended early.
I have a dream.
Link Keys, WALB News 10.
Members of the King family are also convinced that James Earl Ray was not the assassin. In fact, King's son Dexter met with Ray in prison in 1997. He shook his hand and said he believed that he was innocent.
Now, the worst part is they neglect to tell you about the civil case. They just omit it. So it's, well, members of the King family. No, the whole King family and a civil court found that there was enough evidence to prove that there was a conspiracy to kill Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and it incorporated people from the CIA, the FBI, as you just heard, going all the way up to Hoover, Army intelligence. Army intelligence was in Memphis watching him. They were all over him. So yes, there's more than enough evidence. And by the way, in the clip in the end there, you heard it say, well, Bobby okayed wiretaps on him. Yes, they did. That was when JFK was still alive, when he was the president. And they wanted to see what was going on. They just wanted to make sure everything was on the up and up. And not too long after, and it was under pressure, by the way, from Hoover. And not too long afterwards, Kennedy was killed. And Bobby, he got caught up in everything else. And while he was still the Attorney General, so he never canceled the order to have the wiretaps. So when he left office, that order was still going. So that's how that happened. I just wanted to make sure that was clarified. You can learn a lot about this by reading Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty's book, JFK. Go check it out, Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty, and you can always get his second book too, The Secret Team. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That's the podcast for today, January 16th, 2012. I hope I was able to shed some light on the assassination, the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. by forces within inside the United States government. People need to go research this. The King family believes this. There's evidence to support it, and it's been found to be so in a civil trial. Again, do your research, ladies and gentlemen, because truth is definitely stranger than fiction, and you will not learn any of this in your school history books.
Amen to that.
Thank you for listening. Check out Joe on the Freedom Link radio program over at the Orion Talk Radio Network. You can check my radio program out as well, Down the Rabbit Hole over on Orion. Always, support the alternative media. Support sites like the intelhub.com. Support my site, federaljack.com. And pass this podcast, the Intel Hub News Brief, around to everybody you know, because I'll bet you not many people know the things that really happened to Dr. King or any of the other information that we talk about. So it's imperative that you, the listener, get involved and pass this information around. Stand up and make a difference. Thank you for listening, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good night.